My name's Jason Porter. I work for Blevins Franks. I've been with the company for 4 years and I'm their Business Development Director, which involves me travelling around to all of our offices, helping out where I can. And as you can see, we're in 7 different countries and we cover much of the coast of Spain through our offices there, and we're over the islands as well. So there should be an office relatively local to where you're looking to move to or buy in. We've been around now for 44 years, so we're a fairly long-standing business. As I say, we're in 7 countries, 22 offices, and there's 43 partners and private client managers. They are the people that will be dealing directly with you. They live and work in the country in Spain and know all the local, all the regions and what needs to be done in those regions for you to settle down, doctors, dentists, all that sort of thing. So they better help you out in any way on top of helping you with your tax and financial planning. We've got a large administration office in Malta that deals with all of our customer service and back office stuff. It's about 130 people there, and we have a number of very large offices across our countries. Over 5,000 families we now act for, and we've got about 2.5 billion of our funds under advice with a couple of our large investment management companies that we work with. Why do we think we're somewhat different from anybody else that might be potentially advising you on tax and financial planning? It really is that over those 44 years we've built up a huge amount of knowledge about British nationals living and moving to Spain, particularly from the cross-border aspect. So you will have very good financial advisors in the UK, very good financial advisors in Spain, tax advisors in the UK and Spain. But what we do is combine the two, but also cross-border. So we mesh it all together into one holistic piece of advice for you so that you can understand it all and you're not having to piece it together yourself from different advisors. As I said before, we're based locally in the offices in the countries where you're looking to move to. So hopefully we can help you from that perspective as well. All of our people are authorised by the FCA to give advice in Spain and the UK, and as a company we're regulated by the FCA, which is regarded by most people as the best advisory body across Europe. Obviously you're potentially moving at a time when there's a huge amount of change and flux in Europe. What I would say is that if you wanted to go to our website, we have a Brexit page which is constantly updated with additional information and changes that might be coming in. And we will go through the presentation here and you will see where we're looking at the most important thing for UK nationals, which is being legally resident in Spain, your healthcare position, and what the state pension position is from a Spanish perspective, pre and post Brexit. Now, legal residency in Spain is different from tax residency. Being legally resident is being allowed to live in the country, and until 31st December 2020, you are effectively covered under the freedom of movement rules that apply in Europe during the transitional period right up until the end of that period. You're covered under those rules. And then, you know, basically you don't really need to register locally and acquire a residence card. But from 30th of March 2019, there are some new annual residency rules coming in. So new annual residency cards, which you'll have to renew each year for the first 5 years, and then after 5 years you'll be issued with new permanent residency cards. We have got an awful lot of clients that should have applied for the old style residency card but haven't done that because of the freedom of movement. We've got a lot of clients now that are actually applying for them to get into the system in Spain, and then when the new residency cards come in, they'll merely exchange the old one for the new one, supposedly in a very efficient way. But tax residency in Spain, the main determinant being physical presence. So if you are physically present in Spain for 183 days in a calendar year, then you're going to be tax resident in Spain for the whole of that calendar year. If you move to Spain to live permanently, and from the outset you make it clear that you are moving there permanently, then you are regarded as resident from the day you arrive. In addition to those factors, we've got 2 additional ones that have been added over the last couple of years, where people were using loopholes to avoid being resident in Spain, and now they can also deem you to be resident if what they call your centre of vital interest is in Spain, which is all about where the family is, where most of your assets are, most of your investments, etc. But also if your centre of economic interest is in Spain, so if your business is there, but you're deliberately trying to stay under 183 days, they can deem you to be tax resident on that basis. When you're leaving the UK, you obviously want to finish up everything from a tax point of view. If you have a tax return in the UK and you're doing the annual self-assessment return, you need to look for a form SA 109, and if you don't do a tax return, you need to submit a form P85. Both got the same kind of information on there. It's where you're telling them, I'm leaving the UK, my residence in the UK will cease from this date, and therefore the UK can stop taxing you from that point. A lot of people that are moving to Spain are moving at the point that they're retiring, so you need to make sure that the International Pension Centre in the UK is aware that you're leaving. And also you need to request, if you're at the point of receiving a state pension, you need to request an S1 from the DWP people in Washington, Tyne and Wear. That has some relevance later on for you obtaining free healthcare in Spain as well. So the S1 is definitely worthwhile getting if you're at the point of getting a state pension. And also we'd recommend, obviously, because we would give you the advice, is that you take advice on existing investments and pensions that you might have, because most of those are designed for the UK economy and for the UK tax system. They won't work in the Spanish tax system. So if you have things like ISAs, they have no tax benefit whatsoever in Spain when you move there as a tax resident, and therefore they will be looked through at the underlying investments and the underlying income that arises in there, and you'll be taxed on that on an annual basis. You also need to think about when you might sell your main home in the UK. There is no capital gains tax liability on selling your main home in the UK, but if you retain that to see how things actually go in Spain when you move there and you're going to sell it at some time afterwards, you need to make sure that you're not actually going to have a tax liability on selling that property in Spain once you've moved there. So you need to be careful about how long you retain it for afterwards. So really come and talk to us. You need to time things to make sure you're not going to be suffering any tax on your main home when you sell it. Obviously when you're arriving in Spain, you need to set yourself up correctly. Now strictly you don't have to go to the Padron and you don't have to obtain a residence card because of the freedom of movement. But as we've said, it's worthwhile looking at the residence card now because of the new rules that are going to come in under Brexit. And the Padron, it's always worthwhile registering there because you're helping your local area establish the population size, the number of new people moving in, and that determines their budgets for roads, bin men, all that kind of thing that happens locally. So you definitely want to be looking at that. From a healthcare perspective, there's a number of different ways that you can establish yourself from a healthcare point of view. As I said, if you've obtained an S1 because you're getting a state pension from the UK, then effectively that will qualify you for healthcare on the same basis as a Spanish person. Or if you're going to continue working in the UK, you can get a working S1, which will then give you the same healthcare as well. Some people will move to Spain, but perhaps work via the internet and return to the UK for a few meetings at a time, or return for a few weeks at a time. The fact that you're actually paying social security on your UK employment will mean that it'll qualify you for an S1 and free healthcare in Spain. If you're a permanent resident in Spain, so you've gone through the first 5 years and you've got a permanent residence card, that's going to get you free healthcare. If you pay social security in Spain, that is if you have an employment or self-employment in Spain, again you're going to qualify for healthcare. But also in addition to that, you do get people, if it was like myself, early 50s who decided to move to Spain, I'm not going to qualify for a state pension for at least 15 years, so I can't get an S1, but if I move, there's no way I'm going to work, so I wouldn't be paying Spanish social security, but I can contribute in my autonomous region, my local region, 60 euros per month as an under 65 person, but once I'm over 157 per month, and that will get me into the healthcare system at a very reasonable price. But also, if you're going to qualify on this basis pre-31st December 2020, then that means you'll continue to qualify thereafter. If you're in and arranged and all in the system before then, you're fine going forwards. And also the S1 system, for those people that might get to state pension age at some point in the future, the system is going to continue as a means of qualification as well. Okay, so taxes in Spain. Spain's quite interesting. Well, it's interesting from my point of view, it will just be annoying from your point of view, is the fact that it has 17 autonomous regions and they've all got a degree of flexibility in the rates of tax that they charge, a certain degree of flexibility. So you will see differences between the regions. So if you're looking at one region to move to, but you might be interested in another one, you will see that the rates are differently, and that is particularly around inheritance tax rates and wealth tax rates if you're impacted by those. So let's take a look at some of the taxes. They have different rates for different types of income. So those that fall into what they deem to be savings, which is interest, dividends, capital gains and annuities, there's 3 potential rates that might apply depending upon how much of that you've got. But it's not too horrific if you're living off of interest, dividends and annuities. The rates aren't that high at all. But you could hit a rate, and this is Andalusia we've picked out here. As I say, there's 17 regions, and all these numbers are going to vary very slightly. So you can see the bit here that's established by the state, and then the bit here, which is the regional, this particular region, is the bit that can vary. So you will see some variation then in the overall rate, 1 or 2% each way, depending upon which region you're looking at. But the rates overall there don't vary an enormous amount for what they are in the UK, but you will see a variation. There is, like the UK, we have a personal allowance, which is a certain amount of income before we start paying tax, roughly about £10,000 now. They have a personal allowance as well, but it's relieved in a completely different way without going into a great deal of complexity. Effectively, your tax is all worked out first, and then you get a tax credit for this at the end of the calculation. So you won't see it at the top as a deduction, as a relief. It comes in at the end of the calculation. If you're just going to be buying a holiday home, you're not going to be spending more than 6 months there, then you're not going to be tax resident in Spain. And on that basis, you only need to worry about Spanish source income. So if all you've got is a bank account that you're using to pay bills and to draw a few pounds out to live off whilst you're out there, it's unlikely you're going to actually have any Spanish tax to declare whatsoever. But if you move to Spain, spend more than 183 days, you're going to become tax resident in Spain. Most countries around the world, apart from the UK, but most countries, including Spain, work on the basis that if you're tax resident in the country, then you are taxable on your worldwide income in Spain. So whatever arises around the world is taxable in Spain. There's a few variations which we'll see in a second, but virtually everything is taxable in Spain. And that will include things like ISAs and etc., VCTs, EISs, tax efficient investments in the UK. If you've retained them, that becomes irrelevant. You have to look through them and declare the income that arises underneath those structures. But all the usual things will be taxable in Spain: bank interest, rental income, that kind of thing. But with regard to pensions, that's dealt with under the double tax treaty between the UK and Spain. If you're receiving the UK state pension, if you have a company pension or a private pension, if you're moving to Spain, becoming tax resident there, then Spain will tax them rather than the UK, even though they might be sourced in the UK. If you have a government pension, which is things that a teacher would receive or someone like that, then that, confusingly, remains taxable in the UK, not in Spain. So you have a slight variation on how pension income is taxed. One little wrinkle that we see is that some people manage to obtain what we call annuity treatment in Spain on perhaps their pension income. It's a little bit tax aggressive to actually go for that route, but if it's successful, you can find yourself only being taxed on around 15% of what the pension income might be. So people who've obtained that, it's obviously worked quite well for them. What's going to happen with the state pension post-Brexit? Well, effectively the UK government have confirmed that if you qualify for the UK state pension, if you're moving into the EU, you will continue to get the uprating. You'll continue to get the inflationary increases on an annual basis. You're not going to be treated like UK nationals that move to somewhere like Australia, where the pension gets fixed at the date they go. They don't get any increases. If you're moving to the EU, you're going to continue to get those increases, which is obviously very nice. Your options with regard to what pensions you have are fairly varied, and which one you would choose to go, the route to go down, will really depend upon your personal circumstances. So, you know, all of these things we can deal with for you and discuss with you and advise you on. So it's always useful to come and talk to us before you make a choice about which route to go down. Certain countries are more beneficial for certain things. Places like Portugal are very attractive from cashing your pension in. Spain, we need to look at and decide which route to go for you. We're not going to beat around the bushes here. What's going to happen when you die in Spain? It's a little bit complicated because the UK works on the basis of common law, while Spain works on the basis of civil law. The UK doesn't mind who you give your assets to when you die through your will. You can leave them to whoever you like. Individually, your estate, your personal estate, has a £325,000 exemption. Anything over that, 40% tax applies, apart from what you might be giving to a spouse. So it's a relatively simple system in the UK. In Spain, somewhat different. You are supposed to pass your assets to reserved heirs, which effectively is children in fixed percentages. And 2/3 of the estate is supposed to be passed on that basis. So you have to be quite careful. But what has happened in the previous, back in 2015, is that the EU brought in some new rules known either as Brussels 4 or EU's or the European Succession Regulation, which actually allows you through your Spanish will to say, I want my nationality to apply to my will, and the laws of succession, well, your nationality is the UK, therefore under the will on that basis, you can put in your Spanish will, I want my assets to pass according to UK succession law, which is then allowing you to pass them to whoever you wish. So that you've got the flexibility then to pass your assets to whoever you wish in Spain. The issue you've got is that Spanish assets will then be taxable. But Spanish assets are taxable to Spanish inheritance tax. And the way that works is the more detached the relationship you have with the person that your estate is being passed to, the higher the potential rates of inheritance tax will apply. So closer heirs, children, etc., lower rate starting, goes up at a slower rate, and the peak rate is relatively low. But then when you're getting to people that have no relation to you at all, you could be heading rates of 60%, etc., much quicker than you would otherwise do. So you need to think about who you're passing it to through your estate. But you really need to think about, if you're buying a property in Spain, even if you're not moving to Spain, having a Spanish will for your Spanish assets so you can make sure they go to where you want them to, and having a UK will for all of your other assets so that you can pass that according to UK law. Depending upon how wealthy you are, these two could be an issue as well. You have to complete on an annual basis, if you've got assets outside of Spain, where in each class they're worth more than €50,000, then you have to complete a Modelo 720 on an annual basis, which is a Spanish declaration of assets located abroad. And if you don't do that right, or you don't complete it on time, then the penalties and interest can be quite severe. If you're in wealth tax territory, then you also have to do a wealth tax return on an annual basis. Get it wrong, submit it late, don't pay the right amount, again, those penalties can be quite nasty as well. And if these two don't marry up between them, again, you can be under an inquiry. So make sure that if you're in that area, to have a word with us, make sure that you get your returns right and you tell your local accountant exactly what needs to go in those, because getting it wrong is not worth it. But if you're moving to Spain, I've shown you here obviously some of the liabilities and the tax rates that you could be liable to. If you arrange your affairs correctly, if you put the right structures in place, Spain can actually be a very low taxing jurisdiction for you. So come and talk to us, we're all out there, and thank you very much.